Hi guys, in this video we do a brief summary of the history of iconoclasm of Islam in India as documented by Sitaram Goel. Starting with Al-Biladhuri, who wrote in Arabic in the second half of the 9th century, and coming down to Sayyid Mahmudul Hasan, who wrote in English in the 8th decade of the 20th, we have cited from 80 histories and 26 inscriptions spanning a period of more than 1200 years. Our citations mention 61 kings, 63 military commanders and 14 Sufis who destroyed Hindu temples in 154 localities spread from Khurasan in the west to Tripura in the east and from Transoxiana in the north to Tamil Nadu in the south, over a period of 1100 years. In most cases, the destruction of temples was followed by erection of mosques, madrasas and khankas, etc. On the temple sites and frequently with temple materials. Allah was thanked every time for enabling the iconoclast concerned to render service to the religion of Muhammad by means of this pious performance. Some more kings or commanders or Sufis who figure in these histories in a similar context may have remained unmentioned because we had access to the full texts only in a few cases. Most of the time we had to remain content with excerpts or summaries made by modern historians in one context or the other. Many more localities have remained unspecified because quite often the histories are under reference instead of naming the particular places. Mention provinces and regions where large-scale destruction of temples took place as a result of general orders issued to this effect, or intensive campaigns undertaken for this purpose alone. It is seldom that translations retain their full flavor of the language and meaning of the original works. In our case, some of the flavor must have been lost in the citations, which we had to translate into English from Urdu or Hindi renderings of the Persian texts. Even so, we feel that taken together, the citations do bring about something of the religious zeal harbored by the historians concerned when they sat down to glorify Islam and highlight its heroes. Coming to the heroes themselves, some of them figure more prominently or frequently in our citations, such as Muhammad bin Qasim, Mahmud of Ghazni, Shamsuddin Iltutmish, Alauddin Khilji, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, Ahmed Shah I, and Mahmud Begda of Gujarat, Sikandar Lodi, and Aurangzeb. They have earned permanent fame in the annals of Islam by doing what they did to Hindus in general and to Hindu temples in particular, but the others too do not come out discreditably if a state of mind or an expressed intention is any indication. Maybe their achievements in this context have found a more detailed descriptions in histories to which we have had no access. It is highly doubtful if the Mughal period deserves the credit that has been given to it as a period of religious tolerance. Yeah, imagine that. He is mentioning that Firoz Shah Tughlaq was a destroyer of temples, and we don't even look at him that harshly in history, at least in academic history. It is highly doubtful if the Mughal period deserves the credit that has been given to it as a period of religious tolerance. Akbar is now known only for his policy of Sulikul, at least among the learned Hindus. It is no more remembered that to start with, he was also a pious Muslim who had viewed as jihad his sack of Chittor. Nor is it understood by the learned Hindus that his policy of Sulikul was motivated mainly by his bid to free himself from the stranglehold of the orthodox ulema, and that any benefit which Hindus derived from it was no more than a byproduct, like trains built by British. Akbar never failed to demand daughters of the Rajput kings for his harem. Moreover, as our citations show, he was not able to control the religious zeal of his functionaries at the lower levels so far as Hindu temples were concerned. Jahangir, like many other Muslim kings, was essentially a wine and women-loving person. He, however, became a pious Muslim when it came to Hindu temples, of which he destroyed quite a few. Shah Jahan did not hide what he wanted to do to the Hindus and their places of worship. His Islamic record on this score was much better than that of Jahangir. The reversal of Akbar's policy, thus started by his two immediate successors, reached its apotheosis in the reign of Aurangzeb, the paragon of Islamic piety in the minds of India's Muslims. What is more significant, Akbar has never been forgiven by those who have regarded themselves as custodians of Islam, right up to our own times. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad is a typical example. In any case, one swallow has never made a summer. A swallow is a bird, it's a figure of speech, it's a proverb to imply that one bird of summer doesn't usher in summer. Certain localities also figure more prominently or more frequently in our citations, such as Multan, Thanesar, Kangra, Mathura, Somnath, Varanasi, Ujjain, Chidambaram, Puri, Dwarka, Girinar and Kanchipuram. The iconoclasts paid special attention to temples in these places or mounted repeated attacks on them. They knew that these were the holy cities of Hindus and entertained the fond hope that desecration of idols and destruction of temples in these sanctuaries was most likely to make the Hindus lose their faith in their false gods and prepare them for receiving the light of Islam. That, however, does not mean that destruction of temples at other places was in any sense less thorough. Our citations reveal more or less the same pattern everywhere, once the swordsmen of Islam got fired by their religious fervor. It was not unoften that Hindu temples were admired by the iconoclasts for their strength or antiquity or exquisiteness or the expense incurred on their construction. We are told that they were as firm as the faith of the faithful and 1,000 years old. It was estimated that they must have cost so many thousand dirhams or so many lakhs of usher fees, but none of these plus points was reason enough for sparing them from the fate they deserved according to the Sunnah of the Prophet. They embodied an age of darkness and error. They housed false gods. It's their historians talking about Hindu temples. According to those historians, Islamic historians, these Hindu temples embodied an age of darkness and error, and they housed false gods, and they noticed people and they enticed people away from the worship of the one and only true God, Allah of the Quran. So the temples were attacked all along the way as the armies of Islam advanced. They were robbed of their sculptural wealth, pulled down, laid waste. These are all quotes from Islamic historian accounts. So the temples were attacked all along the way as the armies of Islam advanced. They were robbed of their sculptural wealth, pulled down, laid waste, burnt with naphtha, trodden under horses' hoofs, and destroyed from their very foundations, till not a trace of them remained. All these are quotes. Mahmud of Ghazni robbed and burnt down 1,000 temples at Mathura and 10,000 in and around Kannauj. One of his successors, Ibrahim, demolished 1,000 temples, each in Hindustan, Ganga Yamuna Doab and Malwa. Muhammad Ghori destroyed another 1,000 at Varanasi. Qutbuddin Aibak employed elephants for pulling down 1,000 temples in Delhi. Ali I, Adil Shah of Bijapur, destroyed 200 to 300 temples in Karnataka. A Sufi, Qaim Shah, destroyed 12 temples at Tiruchirappalli. Such exact or approximate counts, however, are available only in a few cases. Most of the time we are informed that many strong temples which would have remained unshaken even by the trumpets blown on the day of judgment were leveled with the ground when swept by the wind of Islam. This entire sentence is a quote from an Islamic historian. We find the Muslim historians going into raptures as they describe scenes of desecration and destruction. For Amir Khusrau, it was always an occasion to show off the power of his poetic imagination. When Jalaluddin Khilji wrought havoc at Jain, a cry, and now a quote begins, "A cry rose from the temples as if a second Mahmud had taken birth." The quote ends. The temples in the environs of Delhi were bent in prayers and made to do prostration by Alauddin Khilji. When the temple of Somnath was destroyed and its debris thrown into the sea towards the west, the poet rose to his full height. Another quote begins, "So the temple of Somnath," he wrote, "was made to bow towards the holy Mecca, and the temple lowered its head and jumped into the sea, so you may say that the building first said its prayers and then had a bath." Our citations have a lot to tell about how the votaries of Islam viewed the idols of gods and goddesses enshrined in the temples. Though the Arabic word used in the Quran for idols is sanam, we find our historians using the word but which they had borrowed from the Persians. The Persian word was a corruption of the Sanskrit word Buddha, with which the Persians had been familiar for a long time because there were many Buddhist temples in Sistan, Khurasan and Transoxiana. The word Buddh has actually been used in some of the histories when referring to idols which were burnt or which the infidels were prevented from worshipping. Small wonder that the temples which enshrined statues of the Buddha became special targets for the Islamic iconoclasts. We shall deal with this subject in greater detail in another study. For now, it is sufficient to say that the death blow to Buddhism, a religion centered around temples and monasteries and monks, was delivered by the armies of Islam and not by the much maligned Brahmanical reaction, as our Marxist historians are never tired of telling the world. There was, however, one name which intrigued the iconoclasts for a long time, till the matter was cleared by some scholars of Islam in consultation with the Brahmins. It seems that the Arabs were familiar with the word Somnath, which they pronounced as Somnath, even in the pre-Islamic period. Arab merchants who visited or lived in Gujarat must have told their countrymen about this fabulous Shiva temple. It is also quite likely that Somnath was a place of pilgrimage for the pre-Islamic Arabs who were idolaters like the Hindus and could not but have felt reverence for Somnath. Something of this reverence seems to have survived even after Islam brought about a radical transformation in their religious values. We find reflection of it in the story that Manat, a goddess of the pagan Arabs, so pre-Islamic Arabs, had escaped when the Prophet tried to destroy her and taken refuge in the temple of Somnath. The word Somnath was split into So and Manat in order to support the story. We find references to this story in several histories. Once in a while, another Arab goddess, Lat, was also suspected to be hiding at Somnath after escaping the wrath of Muhammad. In any case, the Quran had proclaimed that the idols were deaf and dumb, could neither help nor harm, and did not know it when they were broken. Subsequent theologians extended the meaning of broken and explained that the idols did not know when they were robbed of their adornments or defiled or mutilated. Their only function was to deceive those who had not been blessed by the message of monotheism. So a Muslim iconoclast cut off the hands of a Hindu idol in Sistan and plucked out its eyes in order to demonstrate the divine truth. Muhammad bin Qasim took off the necklace of the idol at Multan and replaced it with a piece of cow's flesh. The idol did not protest, nor did it do anything else in order to prove that it had any power for good or evil. Other veterans of Islam tried other methods to show to the infidels that their gods were helpless and they themselves misguided. Again, we can depend upon the poetic powers of Amir Khusrau. He quoted the Quran before describing the iconoclasm at Somnath. Quoting Amir Khusrau now, "It seemed," he wrote, "as if the tongue of the imperial sword explained the meaning of the text, so he, Abraham, broke them, the idols, into pieces except the chief of them, that happily they may return to it." Such a pagan country, the Mecca of the infidels, now became the Medina of Islam. The earliest historians relate that while Mahmud broke the other idols, he carried the main idol unbroken to Ghazni. So the big brother did not know what had happened to the little ones, as in the story of Abraham in the Quran. Khusrau's highest poetic performance, however, came when he described the scene at Chidambaram. Now quoting Khusrau again, "The stone idol called Ling Mahadeo," he sang, "which had been a long time established at that place and on which the women of the infidels rubbed their vaginas for sexual satisfaction. These up to this time the kick of the horse of Islam had not attempted to break. The Muslims destroyed all the lings and Dev Narayan fell down, and the other gods who had fixed their seats there raised their feet and jumped so high that at one leap they reached the fort of Lanka, and in that affright the lings themselves would have fled had they any legs to stand on." Poet Amir Khusrau. To resume the story, some of the idols were made of precious metals and or adorned with costly jewels. They had to be handled with care so that the faithful were not deprived of the booty promised by Allah to those who removed his rivals out of the way. Such idols were first divested of their jewelry, then they were broken or burnt, and finally melted down. The bullion and the jewels were forwarded to the caliph or the king, whoever happened to be the patron of the holy expedition. Occasionally, the idols were simply collected and sent to the capital city, and it was the hotspot there it was the despot there who decided what to do with them. They certainly provided great fun to the chosen people before being disposed of in whatever manner was found appropriate, depending upon the type of the idols. Those made of precious metals ended in the royal treasury. Those made of inferior metals were turned into various instruments or vessels, or used for decorative purposes such as door handles. Later on, the bigger ones were recast to make cannon. Idols made of wood and stone, etc., were broken and scattered on the doorsteps of mosques, particularly the Jami masjids, so that people on their way to prayers could trample or cleanse their soiled feet upon them before entering the sacred precincts for offering prayers to Allah and glorifying His last prophet. Several instances are cited when the Hindus tried to ransom their idols, sometimes by expressing willingness to pay their weight in gold. All such offers were rejected with contempt because the hero concerned wanted to earn merit in the eyes of Allah rather than mere mammon. Mahmud of Ghazni made the point when he said at Somnath that he wanted to be known as a bulshikan, idol breaker, and not as a but farosh, idol seller, when Allah called his name on the day of the judgment. Those who want to explain away the destruction of Hindu temples in terms of economic motives are called upon to explain these instances. Bulshikan, not but farosh. Mahmud of Ghazni broke many idols with his own hand. So actually you should remember this, and you should use this in a debate when anyone tells you that Muslims, Islamic invaders destroyed Hindu temples only for economic reasons, like pre-Islamic kings, Hindu kings invaded other lands. They equated with that. It was just economic reasons. So if there was an economic reasons, why didn't Mahmud Ghazni sell those idols? Because he didn't want to be known as an idol seller. He just wanted to be known as the person who destroyed them. Mahmud of Ghazni broke many idols with his own hand, including that of Somnath. He sent the pieces to Mecca, Medina and Baghdad, besides keeping some in his own capital at Ghazni. It was not for nothing that his coin struck at Lahore described him as Butshikan, idol breaker. Subsequent sultans followed his example. Unfortunately for them, the accursed Mongol Chengiz Khan overran a large part of Islamdom and blocked the way to the holy cities in the first quarter of the 13th century, just as the time when a vast field for breaking idols and collecting their pieces was opening before the heroes of Islam in Hind. In AD 1258, his grandson Halaku beat their own idol, the Caliph, into pulp and got the holy city of Baghdad plowed over. So the pieces had perforce to lie before the mosques in lesser pieces. Lahore, Multan, Delhi, Lakhnauti, Daulatabad, Gulbarga, Madura, Burhanpur, Bidar, Mandur, Ahmedabad, Jaunpur, Agra, Ahmednagar, Bijapur, Golconda, Hyderabad, Aurangabad. These were the places that they were sent to. They were brought in by cartloads in the time of Aurangzeb. One of our historians tells us that Ali I, Adil Shah of Bijapur, broke 4,000 to 5,000 idols with his own hands while campaigning in Karnataka.